My dad was a park ranger, and this is a story he's been telling for years. He was patrolling a hiking trail when he heard a loud but short scream. At first, he second-guessed himself and thought it was just an animal, but he knew what he heard and immediately started searching in the direction it came from. The sun was setting, and he didn't have much time. He called out and said, "Hello? Do you need help?" Once again, he heard the scream. He ran down the hill, getting closer. Eventually, the path connected with a road, and on the road was a silver SUV with the trunk open, but nobody was in the car. He called out again and got a response in a woman's voice, "Please help me." It was coming from down the mountain more. He ran down and found the woman at the bottom of a ledge. She was clearly injured and at the least had a broken leg. He calmed her down, gave her some water, and asked what had happened. She told him she had no idea how she got there. The last thing she remembered was eating dinner at her house. She did, however, tell him that her and her boyfriend were in a fight earlier in the day. He called for backup and an ambulance came and tended to her. Her leg was definitely broken from the fall, but she also had bruises on her face and neck. They brought her to the nearest hospital where she was treated. Turns out that her boyfriend drugged her, threw her in the back of the car, and tried to kill her by throwing her off the ledge. Authorities finally found him, and he wasn't too far from where my dad found the woman. He also had a broken arm and leg. The story goes that he fell off the ledge as well when trying to throw her over. He tried getting back up the hill to the car but was too badly injured. He originally tried telling authorities that they were on a hike together and tripped and fell down the ledge. This didn't hold up long because they found marks on his girlfriend's neck that indicated she was being strangled at some point. My dad doesn't know much past this, but last he heard she was out of the hospital and her boyfriend was going to trial for attempted murder. I've been a park ranger for the last 5 years. I really enjoy the job for the most part and haven't had any really crazy stories, but this one stands out to me. I was patrolling a hiking trail that went up a fire road into a forest where there was an area for dispersed camping. If you don't know what that is, it's basically an area where you can set up camp anywhere you want and there aren't designated campsites. I'm driving up this trail and I spot an old, rundown truck that looks like it has some sort of makeshift camper on the back. I drove by slowly, just scanning the area, when all of a sudden I hear this big thud. I gotta admit, I did jump, but when I saw what made the noise, I was relieved. On the other side of the truck, a man had thrown down a big metal cooler onto a rock. He looked up at me and had a disturbingly big smile on his face and waved at me. I waved back and carried on. The trail I was on was a one-way trail that led to a dead end about 2 miles up. I passed a couple more campers along the way, then got to the end and turned back. When I got back to where the old rundown truck and the guy were, the truck was parked in a different orientation, kind of in a manner where he looked like he was trying to block people from seeing what was on the other side of the truck. I drove by slowly again, looking around the guy's truck, but didn't see anything that rose a red flag. I carried on my way and didn't pay much attention to it. Later that night, a man came by the ranger station saying he heard someone in the dispersed camping area laughing hysterically and screaming. Keep in mind, this is far into the quiet hours of the night. Immediately, my mind went to the guy with the rundown truck. My coworker and I climbed into my SUV and headed in that direction. When we got there, we were met with this big fire and stuff was thrown all over the place. Chairs, trash, books, blankets, and food wrappers. The man was running in circles, going absolutely crazy, laughing and screaming like the guy said. We got out and approached the guy. When the man saw us, fear shot into his eyes, and he started running in the opposite direction. He grabbed the metal cooler I saw him with earlier. He wasn't very fast, and we were able to detain him, with some struggle of course, but eventually got him into the car. At this point, another ranger showed up, and we were able to get the campfire under control. After that, we looked around the campground and found a bunch of needles and a white substance all over the tailgate of the truck. The most disturbing part was what was in the metal cooler. Inside the cooler was a carcass of a squirrel that was covered in maggots, but under that was tons of rotting food. I will never forget that sight, and even worse was the smell. We cleaned up the camp as best as we could, and decided we would tend to the rest in the morning. We brought the man back to the ranger station and put him in a little holding room. This guy was clearly drugged out and was possibly on the verge of overdosing. He kept asking us if Momo was alright, and at first, we were confused, but eventually, we came to the conclusion that was probably the dead squirrel in the cooler. I have no idea what he did to that poor squirrel, but it looks like he was dead for a long time. Some police officers eventually showed up with a paramedic and hauled the guy away. I never really got closure on what exactly that guy was on that night, but definitely was some sort of drug. My cousin is with the Forest Service in Montana, and I decided to go up there with her to literally test the waters. She does hydrology and has to ride out to the middle of nowhere to test streams and snow runoff to ensure there's no contaminants. So I thought that sounded fun, and I wanted to do a bit of a tour with her. We were going to have to camp out there for 2 nights, so we packed up all our gear in saddlebags and headed out. The first day and night was amazing. Beautiful scenery and amazing air quality. It really is so peaceful out there. I love that area and wish I got to go up there more often. Anyway, we started out on the second day and my cousin said, "You want to see something weird?" And of course I said yes. So she led me on a bit of a side journey into this tiny little ravine. We ended up traveling about 2 hours away from our actual path we had laid out. At the very end of this fold in the land, she dismounts and tells me to get off my horse too. We tie them up in this gorgeous little clearing, and she tells me to follow this tiny wildlife path and bring our little rechargeable radio. The radio is one of those ones you can plug in or wind up. It also acts as a lantern if you really need it. I follow her, and out in the middle of nowhere, there's a huge coil of wire sticking out of the ground. The wire itself was not weirdly large. It was about a 10 or 12 gauge wiring, just like you see in a house. It trailed off into the bush and trees, so naturally, I decided to follow the thing out of curiosity. My cousin trails behind me as I do, and this wire, after coming straight up from the ground, is strung across limbs of trees and back to the ground. It then snakes around rocks and finally dead ends into an outlet. That outlet is mounted on the side of a desk. It looks like a school teacher's desk from when I was growing up, with a metal base and a wooden top. There was no chair, no building, no nothing, just this outlet and the desk. I'm staring confused at this desk that is in the middle of the nowhere in a forest. My cousin takes the radio, pulls out the cord and plugs it into the outlet. Immediately, the radio turns on. The wire was being fed from somewhere. Now the place we were at had no road access, no buildings for many miles, and no other people all around. I wish I had taken a picture of this, as it was the weirdest thing I have ever seen. Not sure what the desk is for, or who put it there, or what kind of weird things are going on with it, but either way it piqued my curiosity.